Hi, David Odell here with OdellCompleteConcrete. I have the entire student body of Hope Builders in Santa Ana out here, 27 students wanting to get in the construction industry. So they're out here and we're just going over some techniques that are, commonly used out here in the field. What we're going to be doing is we're going to remove these posts. Remember, this is also the part 3 of a 6-part series. Now we're into these posts here, and they're completely termite ridden. I mean, they used the wrong posts went in here. They're 6x6. They just had some Douglas fir. Termites got into them. So I'm going with pressure treated posts on this stuff here, and then I'm gonna also, they set their post brackets were 1 inch below concrete level, so the actual wood base of these columns were in the concrete. So we're going to take them out, and I'm going to drill in new post brackets to the existing foundation. I'm going to epoxy them in, and I'm going to set them 1 inch above grade, because I don't want the post to rot out at the bottom again, in other words, or termites. Termites like to crawl from the ground up. So here's some of the student body from Hope Builders. John is the instructor, John Puckett. So if anyone wants to get into this training program, it's 100% free. And also, when you graduate, you get a lot of stuff. You get nail belts, you get all kind tools in your nail belt, you get Red Wing boots, you get McVaughn hammers. This is all stuff that you get from the graduation, and it's a free program. Now I worked with another class, and they've already graduated. All of those students are already working with big companies. Now this is the second year class that I've worked with. Class of, I think, 60. This is class 64, I believe they call it, or maybe it's 65. Not real sure, but it's one of those two. But these guys, they're going to get hired on with some big companies because they're interested in doing the work. Also, we had a couple girls too, and there's a lot of girls in construction. John's kind of going over everything with them, the best way to remove it, all the different techniques, making sure that once the post is out, you don't want to stand underneath the overhang too long without bracing, stuff like that. We're going to just do one post at a time. We'll use the old post to brace for the new post on one side. Once that new post is in and set, then we'll move it on over and we'll do the same thing on the next side. So we didn't do all this in one day. This is a 2-day project. So since I had 2 posts, new ones, pressure treated, we used one of them as a temporary support for the first replacement. And now what we'll do is use the old post for the temporary bracing for the second post replacement. Now that beam is solid up there. It's not the type of beam that termites will even touch. Now here's the pocket that the post was setting in, and they had, what did they have, a CB66 in there? Yeah, it looks like a CB66 set about 2 inches below grade. So what I did is I drilled right through the bottom plate of that CB66 with a 3/4 hole. Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. We've just got this prepped for the new post to go in. This is the epoxy we used for the all thread. That's a galvanized bolt. Here's the epoxy we used. Completely hard in 20 minutes. You can tighten the bolt up with this stuff. So you can see the problem with this post and why we're replacing it. If you look at that cavity that it was setting in, it was setting 2 inches down below grade. So it was completely dry rotted out at the bottom, and really the only thing that was holding this whole deck was the 2 bolts, because that rot hadn't reached the 2 bolts yet. So this had to be done. It had to be done quickly, otherwise this whole thing would have settled over time. We're going to do one post at a time. We're going to do this one today. We're going to leave that, and we have a temporary. The old post, by the way, was just Douglas fir. It wasn't pressure treated. It wasn't anything treated. So this is the post that we'll actually use for that side, but right now we're using it as a temporary bracing while we get this one set. Once this one's set, then we'll move to the next side. Now, as far as the temporary bracing for that side, I haven't worked that out yet, that detail, because this post has to go in over there, and that one will be out. So, and I think our old post was too rotted to use as a temp, so we're gonna have to manufacture something. I might nail a couple 2x6s together and wedge it up there, something to that effect. And that's it. Well, what we're doing here is this. So we don't set the post back down in this hole where it can rot out again. We're actually we're gonna fill this up with a quick setting concrete. Now that this has been epoxied in, this is drilled 6 inches deep. We blew it out with compressed air, and we also brushed it. Now this bolt is up about 1 inch, just enough that this cover plate will cover the nut over the bolt. The post will set on top of this, like so. And when we fill this up with the quick setting concrete, this will set on top, like so. We put the bolt, we put the washer, we put the nut, and then we put this, and the post goes on top of all that. And this thing's completed. Much stronger than it was from the original build, because we've used a better post. Alright, thanks for watching. We'll keep you posted on progress throughout this job. So that's a little bit about the stuff we use. I mean, that epoxy was great. The concrete patch we used was great. We were able to continue working because of the fast dry time. Nice thing about that epoxy also is it's any caulking gun. It's not a $100 2-part epoxy gun, and it does the same thing. It's not Simpson, which you'll see Simpson on most of your drawings, but this does the same thing, and it specs out the same. Much easier to use though. Here's your pressure treated 4x6 getting ready to go in. I think I said 6x6 originally, but yeah, it's a 4x6. Appears to be a 6x6 because we have it wrapped with 2x6s for decorative reasons. But that's your main structure. Those decorative 2x6s on the outsides, that's all it is decorative. This is your entire support. This, and of course your 45-degree bracing on the inside edge. That gives you a little bit of shear at the top. That's what that does. So we've got we're using all galvanized nails on this. And we're using 3.5-inch galvanized nails, and then we're going to also run bolts through the holes. On the previous ones, all they had was the bolts, no nails. And it was recessed 1.5 inches. Now we're above grade. cut off the excess bolt and flush it out to the nut. What we have here is a Milwaukee battery powered cut-off saw, reciprocating saw. John just mashed that nut down to get rid of the burrs. Yeah, there's the nails that we use, 3.5 inch Galvies. So you can see they're having a little trouble driving these nails in, especially if there's knots. So sometimes, well, what I do in this situation, if I've seen a lot of knots where I'm trying to drive a nail, I'll pre-drill a smaller size than the nail, and then it goes in real easily. John's showing the layout here, how you get that cross bracing in there. Now if we had a 10-inch blade on this, we get to cut through that all with one sweep. This is just a 7 1/4, so it won't make it through a 4-incher or 3.5 inches, so you gotta flip it and cut the other side. I really like those 10-inchers, the radials. Then you just go zip, one shot, but that's for big operation. We had like 4 cuts we had to do this with. Now we're ready to move on over to the next one. John pulled out one of his little trick tools to get those nails set in there without banging the lumber up. Now here's your 2x6s, and then that's your little notch out for the post bracket itself. Because we have those bolts and nuts on the post bracket, we want to conceal all that and still be flush against the post itself. I had to do a little trimming on this fascia. And then also when we nail this on, we're going to keep it up about a 1/2 inch off of the concrete, so that way it doesn't wick in moisture and create more problems for the lumber. But before we do any of that, it's going to all get primed and painted. That way the ends are sealed, and that's going to help also. Here's the primer I like to use right here. It works for everything. So he's plumbing up that temporary bracing with the 6-foot red stick. May even put a couple tacks at the top just to make sure it won't move. Now he's cutting that bracing out. Cutting through the nails. And what that does, by cutting it rather than trying to remove the nails, you preserve the wood from knocking chunks out of it trying to get nails out. Here's the old CB46. It's not a 66, it's actually a 46. Fortunately, we could still get to the bolts. I mean, at least that was above grade. Got our temporary in the moment of truth. John's the only one standing under the deck, and oh, he's got his hard hat on. That's good. But there's what it looks like when you don't have your post set above grade. The only thing really holding the weight of that pressure was the bolts going through, because the bottom of the post were completely rotted out. So the bolts what kept that in place. Vacuum it out, cut off those straps on either side, grind off the concrete where they kind of ramped it up to the post, drill a hole through the bottom plate, brush it, compress air, blow the dust out, put epoxy in, sink a bolt. There's some of that metal coming out from the previous plate of the old post. We had a little trouble getting through that steel plate for the hole, but we got it after a couple of bits. Then we go to the carborundum tip to go through the concrete. Now this is a two-part epoxy, even though it's just a basic caulking gun, a $5 caulking gun. But the way this tip is designed in a corkscrew, both parts come out and mix in a corkscrew coming out the tip. So you have to run it out a little bit until you get a consistent color. Then you know it's mixed properly. Now if you have your tip down in the hole and you fill it full till it starts coming up, the epoxy starts coming out of the hole with your tip in, that should be fine since your bolt is actually bigger than the tip of the nozzle. Now as you push the bolt down, 6 inches down is what we drilled them, it should make a popping noise, and that means all the air has been pushed out and now you're solid. But in preparation for the hole, what we did was we blew them out with compressed air, then we brushed it, blew it again a few times in that order. Then we knew it was clean enough for the epoxy to adhere. They had some nice foundations in here because we never bottomed out. We went like 8 inches deep with the drill and never found bottom, so we know the footing's good. Now we got some quickcrete material going in here, about a 5,000 psi in 1 hour. And what I did there is I actually, while it was still a little wet, the patch, I preset the strap so it wouldn't twist when we were tightening the bolt. That's what I did there. Now since all the post base is set, all we have to do is measure the distance between the two, cut the post and slip it in, pull out the temporary, cut the trim, caulk it, paint it, wrap it up. Since we used that post as a temporary, you can see the chunk it knocked out of the side of it there, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's not going to affect it structurally. Plus we're going to sandwich it in between a couple 2x6s so it really won't be even visible. We utilized the current straps from the top column. Those were well done, so we didn't have to replace those. The post is level and everybody's excited about it. So there's your notch out for your plate, and then your little countersunk drill holes for your nuts. Now we've got an air compressed nail gun here. Now we're showing drilling through the bottom post from both sides. Now since we had a couple toenails in on that temporary bracing, we've got to remove those nails. And that's what they're doing right now. When we put the 2x6 fascia on the outside of these posts, the decorative, we'll end up caulking all the seams with some paintable caulking. And it's paintable in 30 minutes. Put a couple toenails in this angle bracing. Now your decorative Douglas fir's going up, holding it off the ground about a ½ inch. All galvanized nails. Now we're on the final post here. We're not going to use a nail gun on this one. We're just going to pre-drill and then drive nails. I use my wheelbarrows as my workhorses to paint stuff, because I always have those. Now they had some caulking on there initially, so we scraped all that off so we could get in a good flat surface to nail these back on there. And I actually used the old angle cuts that we took off as a template to cut my new ones. So all we have is the primer on these so far. So we just need to put the final coat of paint, which the homeowner said he would do. Anyway, thank you for watching, and make sure you stay tuned for the next part of this 6-part series.